It's YNK, so since I stole all of Thorin's gigs, at the very least, what you guys can do is subscribe to his YouTube channel, so go on and do it right now.
The first two quarterfinals of the PGL Copenhagen major, the first ever CS2 major, are already finished. Done and dusted, and I'll tell you what, they were pretty interesting across the board, right? Cloud9 had their chances maybe early on against Vitality because he was ill and he wasn't on form. By the way, he wasn't even vaguely the best player in the server, though he did have a nice round on that first map. And then what happened was, because they sort of fumbled the Veto and went straight into a map I consider very good for the guys from Team Vitality. Vitality just body bagged them, and actually, yes, Flames did pop off, and so Cloud9 wasn't able to get it done. I think they should have taken a different angle. Like I say, I would have picked Overpass, because first of all, you have a better chance against Vitality on it, and then secondly, there's a world where maybe they don't second ban Anubis. Now, I have some info maybe they would have, but they'd only second banned Anubis once in the last 17 matches and not against Cloud9, so you've got to at least roll the dice sometimes. You've got to try and put people in that position, whereas I can tell you, Vitality was loving that Cloud9 picked Anubis, hence why they body bagged them. Then, obviously in that FaZe Spirit one, you had this crazy Veto, where Karrigan, people don't understand, there's two components to this. Karrigan double bluffed against the guys from Spirit, because what he did was float the initial ban, the perma ban of Vertigo. That was to challenge Spirit to pick it, because then they're picking a way weaker map, and they're not picking into one of their monster maps that normally they beat you on. So that's an interesting angle, but they didn't take it. They didn't punish pick. They still went for the map they like, Mirage, by the way, a map that I think you gave a lot of chances to FaZe from. I even said that in my video. Then FaZe picked their nuke, which again, they can play, but as you saw here, it's very good for Spirit, and Spirit was able to come through. Then the second component of the Veto, people are missing this, is that by then second ban, floating Vertigo again by Karrigan, what he actually was trying to do was just force them and say, you know what, just play your itch at this point in time. If you really love itch that much, pick it then. Okay, I imagine, by the way, that might even have been the map he prepped for. But actually, Spirit decided to 500 IQ themselves, because they picked Vertigo, one of their least played maps and one of their worst maps, one of their worst maps for Donk. And by the way, a map I don't want to be playing for all the marbles in a decider match in my first major, when I can actually lose finally and be eliminated from the tournament, position Spirit wasn't in past tournaments. I don't want the pressure of that. And then also, yes, FaZe has no experience on it, so in theory you're punish picking, but you're picking against mega experienced players with an insanely versatile team, and even though they had no T-side, apparently they didn't prep for it at all, you're not going to know their spots or how they play or have any information, but your team is amazing on the other 5 maps in theory, and you're a mega prep team with loads of looks and things from scrims and discipline. You've won all your scrims against them, then just play the maps you're playing the scrims against them. But okay, they 500 IQ'd themselves. Look, FaZe still had no T-side, so there was a world where Spirit could have obviously won, but they also were on the ropes with all those 1v1s they were barely winning. So in the end, they sort of wrecked themselves. I think if they just picked H for that last one, but I think they would actually overcome, and especially once FaZe lost that decide, I actually think they would have a very good chance to be in the semi-finals right now. But I'll tell you what, this does mean that this bottom half of the bracket, because that was the top half, the really stacked half, well, I'll tell you what, FaZe looks really good, but Spirit wasn't as good. Vitality's looking still a little bit iffy, even they're a little bit more powered up. And Cloud9 was good, but they didn't really come to play at the end of the day, right? So the bottom half, which is Eternal Fire, Na'Vi, and G2-MOUZ, suddenly actually that starts to look like, if I'm those teams, and I look at either FaZe or Vitality, I'm actually thinking, you know what, maybe it's not impossible I could win the major if I get to the final. Before I was just thinking, hey, it'd be awesome to make the final, but if I have to play Team Spirit, what am I going to do against that? What if Z-Woo's on fire in Vitality? That's really hard to play against that. No, actually now, yeah, these teams are beatable. There are edges. There's even interesting Veto angles that I might learn from these series they play on the other side of the bracket. So keep your eye on that. Now then, let's come first to Eternal Fire against Na'Vi, shall we? Right, here's the interesting thing. I'm going to actually show you some of the things in the Veto in a minute to show you why I think this is a very interesting series, but not for the reasons people think. A lot of people are riding Eternal Fire, fitting for their name, are on kind of a heater, right? A bunch of them are fragging out of their minds. But when you get to the map Veto, you'll see it will deflate a lot of the air and the excitement from that hype, because they've got the wrong opponent. They've got an opponent with a very predictable Veto, but unfortunately, whose Veto somewhat covers them. So let's just start with this. The main problem you have if you're Eternal Fire is what's made you so good so far is actually the firepower would go to your side right now. Massively so at the moment in the major, but realistically, not beyond that. Because the problem is, major stats were totally inconceivable that he remained at that level if you don't realise. Like, he had that performance in that last match where he was going absolutely ham in this second phase of the major. He's just been going back. That's not who he's been his whole career in CSGO. At 1.6, he was a pretty good player. Even then, by the way, he wasn't that good at the major level. But that's not going to continue. That's totally inconceivable. And some of those, quite frankly, were lesser opposition. Instead, if you look here, realistically, Xantares is fragging out Control. He's capable of that. I saw him do it in Big Clan. I've seen him do it in a bunch of teams. He didn't used to early on, which is why he got criticised, but he also was kind of the one-man star in the old team, if you remember. They didn't have Woxic. Calyx took a few years to come along. They used to have all those other players, Engine and all them. You don't remember about those players, do you? You all tell me like this is Space Soldiers, but you don't bring up the actual players that played in the team, I'll notice, because you plebs. This is the super team of Turkey that they've never had before. And by the way, it's sort of working, which is kind of cool, but it is essentially an all-star team. It's not actually about like super-duper tactics or whatever. So the problem you have is, I could believe that Xantares does really, really well. Even so, who knows though, because let's be real, he's never been in the playoffs of a major before. So that's an issue already. Then Wicadia, well, you know what? Yeah, I'm feeling Wicadia. This guy's had pretty good stats. He's looking like a breakout rookie. He's actually sort of undervalued to some degree because people are just looking at the Russian players or maybe like players from other countries. They're not necessarily looking at this guy as much because Eternal Fire's only just started to become relevant recently in the last couple of big events. So obviously you have your questions there. He's a rookie. We'll get to that in a second. Then, so that does attenuate the firepower in my opinion. Then you have the thing with Woxic. Woxic's pretty good again. He's sort of back to the form you'd like for him. He's a streaky player. Now, he is a LAN player, and he has been in the playoffs himself. That's cool. That's an angle. But he's streaky. He's not like a dominant AWP, and especially not now in CS2. Calyx just kind of, actually, even though he used to be a star as talent, it's kind of like a supportive element in this team, but he just makes it work. And then Major's all right. He actually can frag half decent for an IGL sometimes. Sometimes not that good. Just seems like he just calls a simple game. If you played that long, and this many years in your career, you're getting some results, I'm going to assume you're all right, or decent, or maybe slightly good, but I don't think he's a top IGL personally. So the key thing for me is this. The major angle is going to drop off. I don't know if Xantares comes at set. So you see already starting to get more concerned, whereas there's so much experience on the Na'Vi side, I don't have to worry as much necessarily about those performances. So what I would say is this. I slightly edge the firepower to Eternal Fire's side. Slightly, mainly because of the major thing shouldn't be considered. But then also, there's another angle which goes like this. A lot of people are going to flame Immer, right? Hasn't been doing that well. Because over on Na'Vi's side, it goes like this. Wonderful's pretty good, but he's not simple. He's just like a good, above average, sometimes pretty good tier 1 AWPer. You have JL, who actually is not even supposed to be like a star, but I tell you what, he has to pop off maps though, doesn't he? He's pretty solid. I might not like him as a person, but his game's pretty good. You have Bit, who's sort of like, he's all right, but he's not the old Bits. That's what people always complain about, and he can be up and down. And then Immer, what's funny is if you just look at his raw stats, people are like, he's not good enough, he's not performing. Then they remember specific maps where he wasn't that good. The problem is this. You haven't gone and looked into it. If you watch Na'Vi enough, Immer just goes based on the map. It's not about like, it's because it's no, it's just based on the map. Like if he's on Anubis, Mirage, Nuke, these are his best maps. These are the maps where he's doing really well. This is why those Blade interviews about like, I'm trying to integrate him as the secondary caller. Very interesting because I wonder if Wave has a bit more control on the other maps, so he gets a bit more integrated in the calling. Maybe then suddenly the overpasses of the world become more viable. Maybe all of a sudden on Ancient he's actually pretty solid. Right now he is a liability on those maps, but the issue is, can you get to those maps? And that's going to be a major concern potentially for the guys from Eternal Fire. So I actually do think if you look at this squad, you have to immediately look at factors like experience, because experience is going to decide whether this team, like Eternal Fire, if they all turn up what they did in the previous Swiss phase, they have a really big puncher's chance to maybe do it just by having firepower alone. But some of that firepower might drop off based on experience. So as I said, Xantares never been in the playoffs before. I'd love to see him go off. He's a talented player. Who knows if he will? By the way, he's quite long in the tooth now. He's not exactly a spring chicken, is he? He was playing years and years and years ago. Then you have the aforementioned Wicadia. Let me just show you something about Wicadia, shall I? So Wicadia is 19 years old, but worse than that, so quite young and inexperienced. But in terms, that's in life, but in terms of experience in CS, he's not very experienced at all. These are all the lands he's ever played in his entire career, guys. So this one's a Turkish one. Who cares? This one's the one that's like Russian teams. Okay, that's all right, but it's not like a big international match with all like giant stadium and fans. So forget that. These are also in CSGO, by the way. In CSGO, then you had like the playoff finish, EPL. Okay, that's all right. But again, it's not exactly a thing where you're in a giant stadium. That's one of the problems EPL had. Then he's in like a betting tournament. Yeah, he's smurfing that with like Russian teams. ESL Challenger Jönköping. Those are those tournaments that like Jim and them go and win a bazillion of. So yeah, he's doing pretty well there. But again, that's not a massive event. It's like the equivalent of an old dream hack. Then at Katowice, they get through the plane, which was sick. Then he was just sort of all right under the pressure of Katowice. And by the way, that's not even in the playoffs. Then he goes to the RMR. Yeah, he's all right. He's all right. They qualify in spite of him in some senses. Then in the major itself, hey, what do you know? This guy's cooking. Sort of. Like, look, for a rookie, yeah, it's good. And then in this recent phase, he's done even, to some degree even better, less deaths, but still nothing insane. So the problem here is, when you say, like, he's a rookie, he's one of the better players, even so, we're not talking about, like, the level of some of the Spirit players or some of these other players that have come out that are monsters. So if this guy chokes at all, I have real concerns. And by the way, I wouldn't blame him for choking. He's in the playoffs of his first major. But it's going to be tough for his team because they rely on that firepower. So then you have this whole angle where, if you look on the other side in terms of experience, you can rely on GL to be solid and to have a pop-off map here and there. And by the way, he's been to the semi-finals of a major. He's won a quarterfinal. He's even won a quarterfinal where some people would say maybe he's an underdog against Team Liquid. Very experienced players, right? He even has played against the champions of the last major in a playoff. He played Vitality in that semi-final, didn't he? So you look, every player on Na'Vi has been in the major playoffs, and all of them except Wonderful have been to the semis or better. That's actually mad underrated. Him has been in a final, guys. He's won 2 playoff series. Some of these guys have been in the semis, like I say. Alexi B's been in a final, obviously. He's been in the playoffs a few times now. So the experience edge goes massively there. And then their coach is insanely experienced compared to anyone Eternal Fire could put out. It's not like they're rocking God B, are they? Like, Blade is a legend. He's one of the greatest thinkers ever of Counter-Strike. So I actually think you look at the experience factor, it's got to go towards the guys from Na'Vi. Then, in terms of in-game leaders, yeah, I'm just going to say it right now, this is an in-game leader diff. Not only is Alexi B across the board, I think, a better call, although to be fair, I've heard him com, and I haven't actually heard the comms of Major, and also I don't understand Turkish, and even then, if his Turkish is semi-scoffed, I wouldn't understand it at all, would I? But anyway, the point is, I've heard Alexi B call. If you get into like an 11-11 close game and Na'Vi is in them all the time, cause their firepower can occasionally be a bit sus and their map pool's a bit obvious, so they have weak maps. When you get into those 10-10, 11-11 matches, he's the guy who makes the Carrigan-esque golden call. That's one of the reasons I've rode with Alexi B the whole time, guys. It's because I've heard the genius elements of his calling that are so rare for in-game leaders. When I used to say MSL was a really good leader, I meant he is really good at building a playbook, getting 2 or 3 maps that you're really good on, figuring out some anti-strats, figuring out some core strats, running the timings, figuring out a couple of stars, how to emphasize their... He's a very good, like, above average or good in-game leader, sometimes bordering on very good. Alexi B, sometimes, like some of the other areas, though people are still stressing that whole thing of like, he did micromanage. I debunked that myth literally last year or something, ages ago, when I pointed out that was just nonsense. It might have been 2022, for fuck's sake. But basically, there's an angle where, yes, look, by the way, if you don't know, MSL, aside from majors, is a company more than Alexi B's career. The difference is, though, Alexi B has that extra component that if he ever gets, like, by the way, a Simple or a Nico in his team, I mean, he can go to the finals. Wonderful here. I think he's going to blast the game to pieces. I think he's so good that if you just give him the pieces, he has his failings, but the right pieces and a coach like Blade, I think he can do so much. So I do actually give the in-game leader advantage and the coach advantage over to the guys from Na'Vi. So then let's get into the veto, shall we? So this is how the veto goes. Even though this is a little bit scuffed, I figured it'd be good to have a visual aid that you can look at with your eyes while I talk and you can think about what I'm saying. Even though I don't just go off the data there, I sometimes look at series before that to figure out how the psychology of the in-game leader and the coach on what they're banning and based on their strengths. But it's obviously not bad. If you don't know, famously, this sort of cheat sheet, which is almost made for like desk analysts who are lazy and don't want to do deep research on what the games are, like matchup core, so you have to just have 3 or 4 players, past 3 months, minimum 3 maps played. That's why sometimes you will have occasions where, like, even though here it just says 0-0, you can have it where actually they played 2 maps, but it doesn't show a percentage because since they only played 2, they don't want to count that and make you think, oh my God, they're like a bloody, oh my God, this is insane. Look at the win percentage here. It's like, obviously it'd be 100% if they win 2 times, and if they lose 1, it'll be 50%. So that's 2 extremes. They tend to ignore that. But for you casuals or plebs, this will help you. So while I'm talking through it, just look at these, but I'll explain why some of these don't make sense and why some of them do, basically. So basically, here's the issue you have immediately. I hinted at it earlier, if you're the guys from Eternal Fire, is Eternal Fire's most played maps with this lineup, there's one that comes massively ahead. On maps like Nuke, Overpass, Anubis, they've played that like 11 times Nuke, 11 times Overpass, 10 times Anubis, 9 times Mirage, 8 times Inferno. Then they have a map called Vertigo. If you're a fan of Eternal Fire, you know this is their map. They've played that, are you ready? 21 times with this lineup. But here's the issue. And by the way, it's the main map they pick by far, even though it's massively come down in terms of how good it was. One of the problems is they were 14-7 on this over the whole time they've had this lineup. Here's the bad news. 5 of those wins came at EPL at the end of CS2. So take 5 of those wins off and you're going to be down already to 9 wins. Then take like 1 or 2 losses off. And you all of a sudden, you're not going to be at a crazy win rate. You're going to be at a good win rate. And are you ready for the bad news, guys? Not only do the guys from Eternal Fire pick it all the time, like out of their last 12 best of 3 series, they have picked it 8 times. But there's 2 pieces of bad news for you. 1, they didn't pick it against Na'Vi, and 2, that's because it's Na'Vi's permaban, and always has been with this lineup. Obviously, Alexi B historically doesn't play Vertigo, right? He fucked around a little bit in G2 with it, but they don't play Vertigo. That's the whole point. So when you look in this particular scenario, you have a team with a puncher's chance who heavily favours one specific map that they want to pick into for comfort in their first major playoffs, and they are already shit out of luck because they've managed to draw one of the only teams that only bans Vertigo and always bans Vertigo no matter the opponent. As in, the team from Na'Vi have banned Vertigo the last 19 best of 3 series first ban. So you are never getting Vertigo if you are Eternal Fire. So already your chances of winning 2 out of 3 maps have gone way down, and you're going to need even better individual stellar star performances on the other 2. So then the question becomes, now that we're going to do Na'Vi bans Vertigo, it's definitely going to happen. Eternal Fire's typical ban, if you don't know, loads of times, 12 of the last 13 times, is they ban Ancient. They've one time banned Nuke, and that was against Tai Lu ages ago at ESL Challenger. So realistically, they're going to ban Ancient. Are you ready for some more bad news here, guys? Well, Ancient isn't even one of the best Na'Vi maps. In fact, it's one of the worst Na'Vi maps. It's not their most played, but it's sort of one of the more played maps. And this is a map where they've lost to Ents, they've lost to Spirit, they've lost to Falcons, they've lost to Virtus Pro, they've lost to Spirit again, they've lost to Cloud9. This is a map where they're 3-6 of their last 9 games played. So you're going to ban one of the weaker maps for Na'Vi, a team I said earlier has a very predictable veto, and certain maps that they don't want to play because, are you ready? People like Imma are bad on Ancient, and you're going to ban it and take that out of the pool. So I'll give them a tiny bit of credit. For the guys from Eternal Fire, here's the tiny bit of credit I'll give you. I don't think you will do this because history just shown you haven't, but I actually think you should just switch up your ban here. Don't waste it on Ancient. They're not going to punish pick it into you, in my opinion, because I think Na'Vi is better. I understand, like with FaZe, it'd be a massive gamble to let this through if then Na'Vi went, I'm going to pick it, and Blade was like, I will punish you. But the issue here is this. Yes, you don't ever play it, but at the end of the day, if you can just frag, you've got a chance potentially against Na'Vi on this one. Instead, I think they will actually do the Ancient ban. Whereas, you know what? I have to say, I would gamble. The obvious one I would gamble and do right now is I would just do a Nuke ban. Nuke's already a map which is like good for you, but again, it's not the Vertigo, so you don't really care in that sense. It's one that you sometimes ban later anyway. It's like your second banned map. It's obviously not a map you want to pick. The reason why I would ban Nuke is because if you go and look, Na'Vi's picks is they pick maps like Anubis very heavily, Mirage, and then the odd Overpass Nuke selectively. So would they pick it into you at this point in time? It's not impossible as a punish on stage. Obviously, they might want to go more to the Anubis or the Mirage, right? So I actually think you could just play it a bit safer and ban it here, because I just don't think Na'Vi's ever going to pick Ancient into you. And then you go to the picks. And what I think is this. Eternal Fire, historically, history says they will pick Nuke. Now, the reason why I think they will pick Nuke from history is because they just pick Vertigo the majority of the time. Aside from that, they pick Inferno, the second most, and then they've had an Overpass pick, but they had one Nuke pick in there. And are you ready? Who do you think the Nuke pick was against? Na'Vi. They had a pick against Na'Vi, guys. They picked Nuke against Na'Vi, and do you know what? They've won against Na'Vi and they've lost against Na'Vi on this map, if you go back far enough. So I actually think this is a team where they might go into Nuke because they might go off history and maybe they want to do comfort. But I think it's actually a mistake to do that. I think they should just go with one of their second most picked maps, which is Inferno. And the reason why is this, because Nuke is good for Na'Vi, but more importantly, and by the way, it's good for people, as I said, like the aforementioned Imma, Inferno is bad for Imma. It's not very good for Na'Vi in general. And the Katowice pick for Eternal Fire was Nuke. So, you know what, why would you want to play that at this point in time? I think you should just go into Inferno. I would float the an Ancient. I would actually ban Nuke at that point in time. Sometimes they second ban it. I would pick Inferno and not pick Nuke, as I am scared they will do. And therefore, if you do that, I actually think if you pick Inferno, I would say Eternal Fire will win map 1. If they don't, I think they will lose the first 2 maps and get 2-0'd if they pick a Nuke or something. Then, over on the other side, for Na'Vi, if you go up to here, by the way, even though it says there, Na'Vi 80% on Nuke, oh my goodness, yeah, but look at all this, yeah, don't worry about that. Like, Na'Vi actually, even before, when they had a lot, even when they had a sample size like 7 maps, still wasn't that good on Inferno overall. It's mega map for you. Obviously, this is more just very, very recently, but it's your best map overall. You've got to pick Inferno here. I hope they don't go with what they did at Katowice and pick Nuke. Just go with the Inferno pick. If you do that, I'll even trust maybe they'll go off these stats. Then you're going to have a chance and you can win map 1. Then it can be an exciting series. Then for Na'Vi, I actually think it's obvious. Look, even though they have these ones here, but look, we've got all these maps up in Thorin. Like, if they don't ban Nuke, we could pick Nuke, 80% win rate. Yeah, 80% win rate doesn't quite count in the same way there. Like, it is their best map, but if they picked it against you last time, it implies they don't necessarily hate playing it against you. That's a problem for me. Then you've got Overpass. Now, it looks amazing. Look, 80% only over 5 maps. And if you extend out the maps a few more maps back, then it becomes like 4-3 in their last 7. That's not that crazy. And you look, they've lost 2. Complexity, Vitality, Cloud9 shit on them, mega shit on them very recently. Then you look at some of their wins. They're winning 16-14 overtime on Complexity. They're winning 16-12 overtime on G2, right? These are just teams where they can just be a bit more sus. And obviously G2's never been that big an Overpass team, right? So I would say this is a bit of a trap. This Overpass here is a trap. You should never be picking it. There's 2 maps you should really be considering if you are the guys from Na'Vi. And I actually do think, even though they may indeed go with something silly, if you go and look historically, their most picked map in the last, let me have a look what this is. In the last 19 series they've played, they picked Anubis 11 times. So if Anubis is available, it should be, then I'm just picking Anubis. I know it goes, yeah, but it's only 67% and they're 67%. What the hell? No. It's your most comfortable map, clearly. It's a map that I've just told you earlier is actually a pretty good map for Imma. This is a map where I want to get to straight to Anubis if I'm the guys from Na'Vi. But with that said, I actually think even though that's the most picked map, I think just to try and punish the guys from Eternal Fire, I think they might actually pick Mirage too. I think it's a very serious world where they pick Mirage because, you ready? They picked Mirage against them at Katowice. So it depends. Are we going to have the last Veto from Katowice not that long ago, or are we going to have an updated one with some people gambling on other maps? Depends how good you are. Depends how much you want to play to comfort. The problem here is I feel like both teams like comfort, right? So I would say, I would personally pick Anubis, but let's say they pick Mirage. By the way, either way, I actually expect Na'Vi to win that map. So then, here's the key thing. This all depends on whether or not Eternal Fire did the float ban and then picked Nuke, which I actually suspect they won't. I think they'll just do the normal Ancient ban and then they'll just pick Inferno. So if that happens, then I think what happens is Eternal Fire bans Nuke. See, when Na'Vi didn't change up and pick it. Then Na'Vi, actually, given the choice of Ancient and Inferno, or in this case it'd be Ancient and... Wait, if they picked Inferno, then Nuke could be banned. And it would be Ancient and what map? Overpass. Ancient Overpass. Between those 2 maps, I mean, is that even a question? Ancient is terrible for Na'Vi. It's obviously not a map played here. So I don't think they would ever dare gamble into it. So I think actually you can make Na'Vi at the end ban into Inferno. Now the problem there is this. I wanted them to pick Inferno for Eternal Fire because then they can potentially win map 1. If instead they veto into it and they make the map something like Nuke and Mirage, or Nuke and Anubis, then I'm just telling you right now, I think that Na'Vi's going to win 2-0. So what's funny is if they can get to a third map and it's Inferno, then I actually give Eternal Fire a pretty decent chance to win that one. I do think it's a mad sus map for Na'Vi, way worse than this suggests, especially the eye test. And if you look at people like Iba who are key players, especially on the T side. So I think actually Eternal Fire has the chance to win, but only if they get to a third map with my Veto. And quite frankly, I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm going to say Na'Vi wins the series, potentially 2-0, hence why I did a bet on it. Now, the other quarter-final is, of course, G2 Esports against MOUZ Sports. Now, the problem here, let's just start at the top. Because of that game crash, where I think it put VP in a very good spot, and I get the feeling like Na'Vi, the G2 guys looked like they were ready to bow out of that tournament. Huxey's face, everything about them, their body language was like, we're just going to get eliminated. Remember, they just barely escaped a bit of a scare early on themselves in the previous series. So I think G2 was all but out of this tournament. So the fact they got a lifeline, look, when you have players like Modesty and Nico, yeah, that can go. Even what if Hunter has like an inspired performance? Yeah, you can do a lot. Modesty might be the best AWPer in the world. The issue is, though, you're not in the best form right now. But you're playing against MOUZ, who's in incredible form. Probably the best form ever this team has ever been in. It's never looked this good since 1.6. Or, no, let's be real. It's never looked this good since Carrigan's, I guess, at the end of 2019. Obviously, that was a very good MOUZ Sports. But you go and look at this team. Here's the issue. The MOUZ lineup has never played 2 maps on LAN, Inferno and Anubis, which we'll come to later. Now, it hasn't been an issue. They've been doing great. But that's an area where it depends how big the balls from Taz and from Huxey are to actually do something in the Veto. Then you look at some of the other ones. Straight out the gate, I'll tell you, we'll get to this map analysis, don't worry. But one of the biggest problems you already have is MOUZ's permaban is G2's best map, one of their most picked and their favourite decider maps. So already, MOUZ the better team, in my opinion, right now, in better form, with players in better form and consistently better form, and actually not even bad experience levels, are going to get to, just like in the last series, they're going to get to go, hey, you know what, you don't even get to play your best map. So that's already an issue. Now, yeah, sure, MOUZ doesn't play Inferno, and that is G2's go-to pick. So when we come to that, it's going to be an issue. But the problem is, obviously, in the G2 game, you all know firepower. It can be the thing that makes you win, or it can be the thing that makes you lose. And that's why the Huxey problem is so big, isn't it? Because normally, the old woman like JKS, they had very good firepower, didn't they, consistently? This one, it's amazing in the sense that it can kill or it can make you win. Like, that's the problem. It's way too up and down because they put too much stress now onto Modesty. Now Nico has to perform. Hunter's been pretty off for quite a while. Nex is just all right, and Huxey is a low fragger and not a genius tactician, in my opinion. So one of your issues is G2 has firepower issues, while at the moment, MOUZ has none. Now, look, MOUZ will drop off a bit from where they were at this tournament. Let's be real. You just have to be realistic on that one and not be too silly. Modesty is mega hard carrying. Mega hard carrying, right? That can continue, but hey, let's see, right? Monasty's never played actually in a major playoffs, if you don't know. Nico's been like pretty good, but not the level you expect a Nico MVP level. After that, Nex has just been bang average, but okay, he's not supposed to be a great player, but he is replacing JKS. Hunter has been underperforming and underwhelming generally, and Huxey's just not that good, guys. This is the last few months of this team, and so what do you expect? Where's the glow up in terms of firepower? It can happen on 1 or 2 maps, sure, but realistically, G2's just not the same team they were with JKS. Well, you look at MOUZ, right? Shu here, if you don't know, would be the 3rd best player on G2 by overall rating, and he's the IGL and lowest rated player by far on MOUZ. If you don't know, he then has 4 players who are all above a 1.1 rating over the last few months. He has Exertion, who's at the top. By the way, he's like fucking entry aggro rifler. It already shows you why they're so dangerous, MOUZ. Yimfa is supposed to be some sort of a Zipnix-esque character, and he's already fragging out and winning clutches. Toshi isn't on a Modesty level at AWPing, but I tell you what, he's pretty good, and now he's actually starting to get consistent and not be as weak in playoffs. And Brolan obviously has been a revelation back to old Fnatic Brolan, who's a really talented rifler, right? So you've got some really dangerous tools, and in my opinion, a better caller in Shuhi here. So already you've got to have your issues, right? I think actually, even if MOUZ drops off a little bit, because some of them have been fragging too much at this tournament, it won't matter. If Nico doesn't play MVP level CS, I think it's going to be very hard for G2 to win this series. As I pointed out, Hunter, Nexa and Huxey can have low fragging games together, and that is the death sentence if you are the guys from G2. Then you've got the whole factor, like, hey, I just said Tosh isn't on Monasty's level, right? No, he isn't. The problem is, though, the experience gap is where this is getting interesting. Toshi has been to the semi-finals of a major, guys. He's played the winners of the major. This guy, Monasy, has never been in the playoffs of a major. Never, ever happened. Now, yes, he's been another prodigy that's been great online right from the get-go, but he's been up and down at majors himself. He's mega right now, but hey, he's going to have a lot of weight on his shoulders. And in CS2, with those crazy smokes and the fucking aggro at peaker's advantage and people just Ferrari peeking into you, he better fucking go ham in this series. And hey, let's see what maps we play, because if we end up playing like a Vertigo or something, I hate being trapped as an AWPer on that map. I think that's one where star players go to die. It's really, really hard in my opinion. So also the series can play against him. Then in terms of the experience gap, your brain tells you G2, they've won all the big prestige lands, like they've got all the experience. No, the experience gap isn't as bad as you think, guys, because what you're forgetting about is this. Shuhei was obviously in the Gamer Legion that went to the last major final. And then a bunch of the other Black Mouse players were in the one from IEM Rio when they went to the semis, didn't they? So that's actually pretty good. Meanwhile, this G2 lineup together never made it into any majors. This G2 lineup with their JKS never made it into any majors, playoffs that is. And then obviously, Tosh has been in playoffs, Monacy hasn't. Okay, that can even the gap up. You saw what happened to Shiro against FaZe, right? So then let's get into the Veto, because this is where it gets fun. G2 is a team that is willing to change up their permaban, so it's not actually a permaban in the same sense. They're not like those teams that the last 17 times, 16 out of the last 17. No. Out of the last 16 series that G2 has played, 10 times they've permed Mirage, but 5 times they've picked Overpass, and 1 time it was actually against Ents. They actually vetoed Vertigo. Meanwhile, if you go and look on the other side, Mirage, Overpass, Vertigo, right? Remember, the maps for Mouses, they're really good on Overpass. They're really good on Mirage. Vertigo, they're pretty good on too. Any of these maps will do against this team. You want to potentially take any of these 3. So I actually think, quite frankly, since MOUZ isn't a team that picks Overpass, it's not one that they've picked in any of their last 10 series, including against G2. In previous picks, they've done Inferno, Vertigo. I actually think, logically, you don't have to worry too much about MOUZ picking Overpass, in my opinion, which obviously is not a great map if you're the guys from G2. I actually think it's way more likely that they will just do their standard picks. So I would ban Mirage. I think it's just a safer one to ban. It's one that's a little bit scary for you. It's not a good map if you're G2. If you don't know, they played it twice. Look over here. They played it twice and they have no score. They've never won on it. They lost to Na'Vi and they lost to Ents. Meanwhile, pretty good map for MOUZ, right? So I would say at this point in time, you ban Mirage. You just get that right out. Then if you're MOUZ, it's easy. Last 10 series you played, you banned Anubis every single time, including against G2. The last time they played at Blast, this G2, yes, they banned Anubis. So I think Anubis is the obvious ban. Also, you still haven't had insane experience. You just do it for comfort. If you're the better team in general, you can just go with your permaban on this one. Especially because, I said it at the beginning, far and away the best map for the guys from G2 is Anubis. And you're going to go, that isn't Thorin. Look, it's tied with Inferno and they're actually 80% win rate. They've only played 5 times on Nuke in the last 3 months. They've played 12 times. 12 times, guys, on Anubis. So you just ban it if you're MOUZ, and you've taken out their biggest strength and their comfort. And they're already in a tough spot. You're going to be able to pick a map that you like against them. Then when it comes to your map pick, I actually think G2, logically, because it won't be banned by MOUZ, you'll just pick Inferno. Inferno's the one you're going to pick. And the reason why I bring that up is this. Because your most picked maps in order of the last X amount of series are Inferno, Anubis, and then it goes way down to Nuke and then 1 Ancient game. So if you look previously when they did play MOUZ, they picked Ancient. That was way back. And then if you go down, they've picked a bunch of Nuke games at Vincere, but at this tournament more recently, it's Inferno that they're going for. Inferno's the one that they've gone back to, and they feel more comfortable. It's always been one of the maps that you've seen Nico playing. I would say like Huxley has a decent enough calling style. I'm not a big fan of him in general. So I would say actually, I think there's a very good world where you pick Inferno. And you know the logical reason? What did I say at the beginning of this segment? Even though MOUZ is really good, what's bizarre is they ban Anubis, and then they don't play Inferno. Because look, wait a minute, they've played it 2 times, but no score, because you have to have 3 maps, remember, to do that. Yes, they're not a team that's very good on this map. So why not just pick it? It's a map you already pick anyway as your most picked map. Just pick it if you choose. Yeah, they're going to prep for it. But at the end of the day, you're living and dying by your firepower. You're not coming up with some 10 million IQ, call some Huxley. So you just pick it at this point in time. And by the way, it gives you a chance. Like I'll actually say, if they pick Inferno, I do think G2 can win this. I don't know that I'd heavily favour them, but I probably would say gun to my head that they do win Inferno. So I think that gives G2 a chance to get to a 3rd map. Then for the guys from MOUZ, right, there's 2 obvious angles here. Previously, it was back at Blast. They did pick Vertigo against them, so you can look at that angle. The problem is, though, Vertigo's not their most picked map. Their most picked maps are Ancient and Mirage. Now, being as in this scenario, I'm saying G2, I think, is going to ban Mirage. The question is, do you want to play Ancient if you're the guys from MOUZ spots? Last time you played Vertigo, by the way, that's a good pick too. I actually love to put G2 on a map like that. You can also pick Mirage. I will say, I think Mirage gives them not a great chance because what do you know down here? Oh, what's that? You remember, you think of the old G2 with JKS, of course, they'd be playing on Mirage, right? No. This is a dangerous map for them. So if you're MOUZ, you can pick into the Vertigo, just not that good a map for them. But I would actually say, maybe consider a gamble onto an Ancient. Because obviously Mirage is going to be banned by G2 in my opinion. So I'll just bank and say, I think maybe MOUZ will pick Vertigo. I also think Mirage is just like the old Dust 2 in the sense that you just don't want to let people play it whether they're good at it or not because they can just fuck around, frag out and sometimes win. So I would just go for, I think, a safer pick of Vertigo. If that happens, I'm taking MOUZ to win this all day long for the map. Then you come to the second bans. I actually think second ban, it's just logically what they do, second ban anyway. The most banned second map from the guys from G2 is Overpass, and it's the map they banned against MOUZ spots last time, and they banned it a whole bunch as well at Vincere. I think you ban Overpass, which leaves MOUZ with a choice between probably Nuke and Ancient. If you go up here, Nuke's not very good for them, so logically, if you go down here, will they indeed pick? By the way, you might be wondering, why doesn't G2 just pick Nuke though? Haha, they are so good on it. Because here's the problem, they don't pick it. That's a map that out of their last 16 series, they picked twice, and that was against Monty and Heroic at Katowice. So I don't know that you do that in the major playoffs if you're a team that's as shaky as this squad is. So I think instead, yes, that G2, out of that choice, they will ban Overpass, then MOUZ will be left with Nuke and Ancient. They'll ban Nuke, they'll get Ancient as the decider, and by the way, they will win Ancient, and they will be going to the semi-finals unless they have some sort of a collapse with their players. I think they will be beating G2 and going to the semi-finals. Hear me now! Because the thing is, I wouldn't be able to get all the work I do without my brethren, the Mandem, in the Skrilluminati, my Patreon community, because this video, like all of them on my channel, is kindly supported by Frisky, Matt Pugnatio Rajcula, Ahmed Hadjou, Jensen Goh, Tobias Bernasconi, Animosity, Thorin, Tosh, and you know it, a special thanks always goes out to Jerky's Minion, who always has my back. Would you like to ask a question in my regular AMAs? Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest I could take in my work? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming guests are going to be. Maybe you want to be part of those lengthy esports discussions I do with my top donators. Well, if so, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today, where? Via the Patreon link in the description box below.